Good afternoon, everyone. Josh of Severe Weather, and welcome. Happy Wednesday to you. We continued to take a look at a potential tropical system. The next name on the list, Patty, which is expected to form in the Caribbean Sea sometime between the end of this weekend and early next week. So I'm going to talk about what's going on with that system and where it may go and how strong it could be. We are also going to take a look at a major typhoon aiming at Taiwan here over the next 24 hours, maybe one of Taiwan's strongest typhoons. And then we're going to look at a potential tornado outbreak ongoing across the plains later today into tonight, and maybe more severe weather in the coming days as well. So thank you so much for joining me today. I'm a meteorologist in the Raleigh area. Here's a look at what we are talking about, the next potential system expected to develop sometime here between later Saturday and next Tuesday. Some uncertainty on how all it's going to come together, but models are all showing development of this now, at least our major models. And the track continues to take it towards Jamaica, maybe towards Haiti, and maybe towards Cuba and the Cayman Islands. But eventually, models are starting to come into a better agreement that high pressure will steer it towards the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. After that, that's where the uncertainty grows, but we are going to talk about that. And in the meantime, we could have a weaker system forming near the islands, although that one's not looking like it's going to be nearly as impactful. So we are going to take a look at the setup here. And as of the latest update, we still have just a 40% chance of development at this point into a tropical depression. But I do think this number is going to start to climb here later this week. Right now, things are still in the very early stages of organization. It's going to take some time for this to get going, but chances should start to climb here later in the week as conditions become more favorable to see that development. And you can see the area in orange here is where that system may develop. So a pretty good window where this could form near the Cayman Islands, near Jamaica, near Haiti, or possibly much farther south in the southwestern Caribbean Sea. Here's a look at the Atlantic Basin right now, and you can see this is the area that we're monitoring, very disorganized at this point, and wind shear remains pretty high as well. But over time, the wind shear is expected to lower, and water temperatures are still very warm here in the Caribbean this time of the year. So there will be an opportunity for this to gradually become better organized and then eventually strengthen more significantly, potentially, if that wind shear remains low. Elsewhere, we do have a front that is stretched across the central Atlantic and down to the Turks and Caicos and near Cuba. The tail end of this front, when the wind shear drops off, that is where we're going to keep an eye on maybe a quick system spinning up. I don't think a big-time storm, but something we need to keep an eye on. And then elsewhere, we do have a very small circulation here over the central Atlantic that will eventually move westward, but right now it's not expected to develop. Maybe later on that's something we'll be watching, but a very small spin. Here's a closer look at Central America, the Western Caribbean, and you can see we continue to get hammered with heavy rain over Nicaragua, Honduras, and Costa Rica, at least on the Caribbean side. The Pacific side is fairly quiet for the time being, but over time we could see development there as well. And we are seeing some heavy rain affecting portions of the northwestern Caribbean, in particular the northern side of Jamaica, Ocho Rios, for example, as well as some of the Cayman Island chain here. We are seeing some scattered showers and thunderstorms, and this is going to be the beginning of off and on rain for the next several weeks across this area. Just a very wet pattern expected right on into probably at least the middle portion of November, if not later. The reason why we are seeing what's called the Madden-Julian Oscillation. I've talked about this for several days. This is a pulse of rising air that crosses the equator. It takes about a month or two to cross the entire globe. It's been in the Western Pacific. That's where all of our storm action has been. But it is going to head into the Eastern Pacific here by the beginning of November and then come around towards Central America and the Caribbean for the first 10 days or so of November. And that's when we see not just a favorable MJO, but look at where the center is here. This is kind of the null area. Now we're looking at twice that much. So not just rising motion, but significant rising motion, which is going to lead me to believe that this could be one of our busiest Novembers on record across the Atlantic Basin. We are in a very favorable phase, pretty much right through about the 15th or so, maybe even the 20th. So the opportunity is there, if conditions are right, to see not just one named storm, but maybe a handful of them. So pretty unusual, but with us transitioning towards La Nina here this winter, this is certainly something we've anticipated for a while. Now we're starting to see it come to fruition. Water temperatures in the Caribbean remain above average. And you can see, well, it's tough to see here, but this area in here is where water temperatures are at or above 87. This area in here at or above 86. So Very favorable temperatures, as high as the upper 80s here across the entire Caribbean. Now, the Gulf is quite a bit cooler. We do have still significant warmth over just the far southern portion of the Yucatan Channel, and still warm enough in the Bay of Campeche. But once we get closer to the Gulf Coast, those water temperatures drop off. So it becomes less and less likely the farther north you get to see a stronger system this late in the season. It's not like it can't happen, but the odds of something forming in here and strengthening aren't nearly as high as they were with Milton or Helene now that the water temps are cooling down. But even though we say that, the water temperatures remain above average, but the averages are dropping off here as we head into the second portion of fall. So something we're keeping an eye on at this point, but the trend is certainly our friend in the Gulf, not so much, though, in the Caribbean. Now, if we take a look at the ensembles here, the European is indicating some gradual development here. And I don't think it'll happen quite this quickly, but in the Southwest Caribbean by the weekend, as we move this on into time, you'll see the chances continue to climb. And what does form somewhere in this zone here is more than likely going to be tracking northward towards Jamaica, but there's a lot of spread here. We could see something like this or something like this at this point. This would put us to next Monday. Beyond that, you'll see whatever is out there is trending now northwest towards the Yucatan Channel and maybe western Cuba and maybe northern parts of the Yucatan Peninsula themselves. And this puts us at the end of next week. And you'll see there's nothing that's coming up farther north than the Florida Keys or farther north and west than the Bay of Campeche over the next 10 days. Over time, obviously, the certainty level does drop down. So it's tough to say for sure if something forms, where exactly it ends up if it does go into the Gulf. But right now, I think that is an option we need to be watching for. If we look at the European Meteorological Center, you can see a pretty good chance here, 60% or higher of a tropical system next week. As we move this along further, you'll see there's still a possibility of something across the Eastern Gulf. So if I back this up real quick here, and I don't know if I can, I guess I can't, but what this means is that we are likely going to see that genesis in here and the possibility that it could go either this way or this way. Very unlikely it comes up towards this area. There's also a small chance something does form on the Pacific side as well. And you'll see there's also something maybe to keep an eye on both here and here, kind of 3 or 4 separate different areas that we're going to need to monitor. But obviously the one that screams at us is the one in the Western Caribbean. If you look at the rest of the globe, this is basically it. Once we get past next week, I mean, yeah, there's a possibility of something across the Eastern Pacific, a small chance of something both in the Indian Oceans and in the Western Pacific. But the hot spot, as you can see here very clearly, is the Caribbean. For the following week, you will see that maybe the Indian Ocean and the South Indian Ocean get a little bit busier, but we still have to watch things closer to home here around Central America. The following week, you know, things are starting to quiet down globally, which is good news. But there's still some areas we need to watch even into the end of November here, even into the Indian Ocean. At that point, I think the Atlantics are beginning to shut down, but we got the next 3 weeks to get through at this point. Here's a look at wind shear. And this is the GFS ensemble, and the areas in red are much above average, significantly higher wind shear. And through Friday, that wind shear is pretty significant over the southern Gulf of Mexico and eventually across the northern Caribbean. That's going to keep things from forming. After we get past Saturday and Sunday, you can see the wind shear drop significantly. It's going to be much lower than average, especially across the Gulf of Mexico, but significantly low here in the Southwest Caribbean, 10 knots or less. This should get something to eventually spin up and become more consolidated, but it could take a few days for that to happen next week, and maybe until the middle of the week. As we move later into the week, you'll see the wind shear is climbing over the Gulf region here. That's going to be our next severe weather episode next week. But the southern Gulf remains a spot where a storm can be sustained at this point. The Eastern Caribbean also has lower than average wind shear, so we need to keep an eye on that as well. As we move this along towards the middle of the month of November, the wind shear does pick up. Now, the averages are also coming up, but you'll see that they still remains pretty low here over the southern portion of the Caribbean, especially the Central Caribbean through the middle of the month of November. So let's take a look at ensembles really quickly. This is all of the potential. So the whole GFS system runs multiple options here, and you can see where it's showing gradual formation. Nothing through Friday, but as we get to the weekend, we do see lowering pressures here in the Southwest Caribbean. Over time, you'll see the average of all these ensembles pulls us off to the west or to the northwest, but there is a great amount of spread here with the GFS ensembles. But it keeps the pressure low into the week after. So right now, really too early to make any kind of call. The European is continuing to show that bend to the northwest as well once something does in fact form. This could be by Sunday morning. And then here comes Monday and Tuesday of next week and into Wednesday. And a majority of the ensembles pull this system closer to the Yucatan and to the southern Gulf of Mexico towards the middle of next week. After Election Day, but more likely Thursday and Friday when that opening is there for it to sneak into the Gulf of Mexico. And finally, the Caribbean ensembles, or Canadian ensembles in the Caribbean, do show the development a little farther to the west here on Friday. But eventually this does pull northeastward and then bend back to the left here. And we do have several solutions that are threatening Jamaica, by the way, here between Saturday night and next Monday, and then pulling it Tuesday towards the Cayman Islands, Wednesday towards the Yucatan, Western Cuba, or the Southern Gulf. And this one has more solutions that threaten the Eastern Gulf, but again, that's awfully far off. So here's a look at the spaghetti plots here. This is again, the ensembles. The European from earlier today. This is weathernerds.org. Great website if you like spaghetti, if you're hungry. You can see, yes, there's a little bit of a signal here north of Puerto Rico by next Tuesday, but obviously the one we're watching is this feature here. And nothing super strong on the European, but there are a couple of more significant solutions if it does, in fact, avoid land and come up through the Yucatan Channel. This wouldn't be, though, till next Thursday and then Friday. And you'll see there's more than half of the ensembles keep this out of the Gulf or just bring it barely into the Southern Gulf. Very few take it up towards the Gulf Coast. A couple may threaten Florida, but you can see it's going to become hostile here later next week. So whatever does try to come up reaches cooler water and stronger wind shear. Here's the GFS ensemble, same time frame. Here's the first feature here, north of Puerto Rico and Hispaniola, a weak system. You see the GFS pulls this farther to the right and develops it farther east than the others, but it does eventually pull it back to the west. Here's that turn, and we now have more solutions pulling it back to the west here next Tuesday into Wednesday. So the time frame on these ensembles is actually in decent agreement. Now, how it plays out is still very uncertain, but several ensemble members pulling this west-northwestward towards either the Yucatan or towards western Cuba between Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. And then there are some solutions that pull it northeast towards South Florida before next weekend, and there are some that keep it in the Southern Gulf and some that don't even get it there. So yes, it's a sloppy mess, but I'm watching trends. I'm not watching every single potential solution. Operational models. Here's a European from earlier, and this model is struggling to develop our system, but it does show some gradual development here towards next week. You can see that lower pressure showing up between Tuesday and Wednesday heading towards the Yucatan, but that's it. The European, in my opinion, has not been doing great this season. It is not strengthening the storms that other models are strengthening when, in fact, that's been the case. So I don't trust it that much. I will say that the GFS has been back and forth quite a bit, but it is showing something again. Low pressure here south of Jamaica on Sunday, grabbing it northward and then swinging it around Haiti and then pulling it between Jamaica and Cuba by the middle of next week. And eventually it does go through the Yucatan Channel by Friday morning, and it ends up in the Southern Gulf. After that, wind shear is probably going to kill it if it does try to come up in this direction. So that's the GFS. I want to take this back, though, to Friday morning next week. Here's the Canadian model. This one's been a little more aggressive even than the GFS, and you can see it never hits Jamaica, but it brings it close by here just to the south of that coast here on Tuesday. And then over the Northwest Caribbean has a pretty good amount of strengthening over that warm water. And this has a stronger hurricane moving into the southern Gulf of Mexico by next Friday morning. And then it stalls and maybe tries to get picked up by our next trough and turn towards the Florida Keys if it even gets that far north, and it may not. And this would put us here at the following Saturday morning. I just want to take this back and show you. Here's the GFS 12Z on Friday next week. Here's the Canadian 12Z on Friday. It's just about in the exact same place, maybe 30 miles northeast. And then the Icon model also agrees on that. You can see that development here in the Southwest Caribbean over the weekend, a tropical storm by Monday morning. This system, though, turning west south of Jamaica, heading over the warmest part of the Northwestern Caribbean next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, and also entering the Gulf as a stronger hurricane by Thursday, 0Z. So take a look at this. All three models here, the GFS, the Canadian, and the Icon, all have this just north of the northeastern tip of the Yucatan in the far southern Gulf. And for something that hasn't formed, that is pretty good agreement. Now, this could still change. They could all be wrong, and I've seen that happen before, but we are starting to see some clues as to what may actually happen here. Here's a look at our rainfall potential, and it's very high where this system is going to track near the west coast of Central America, but in particular over the Central Caribbean. We see totals as high as over 800 millimeters in parts of Dominican Republic and southern Haiti. That's amounts of 20 to 30, maybe 40 inches of rain on the eastern side of where this forms. And we see some of this coming up into the Gulf as well. Heavy amounts over western Cuba, over the eastern shore here of the Yucatan, down to Belize, and all the way down the coast here. So somebody's going to get a ton of rain. And in my opinion, it's Hispaniola, but quite possibly even Puerto Rico could see quite a bit of rain as well. Jamaica could see a lot of rain. So that is the Atlantic. We do want to take a look here at the rest of the world. A couple of disturbances that we're tracking in the Pacific, but really the big one on the map is violent typhoon Kong-Rey. And as I zoom that in, you'll see it was actually stronger this time yesterday, a super typhoon, massive eye, now moving past Cagayan here in the northern Philippines. That's these islands here north of Luzon, and likely to take a direct hit on Taiwan here. The time frame for that is going to be around midnight here Eastern time, so it's going to be Thursday lunchtime or early afternoon on the southeast coast of Taiwan. And you can see just a massive outflow with this system. The eye has not gotten much smaller. It's massive, but it's a very powerful storm. Sometimes these bigger, the bigger the eyes are, the more dry air is getting into it, but that's not the case here. This is a very well-defined storm system. Here's the radar from Taiwan. And you will see the western eye wall moving into range here. I want to see if I had this loaded. There we go. You can see here well into range now. This is the east coast of Taiwan, and the storm is tracking basically right in this direction here. So we're going to see the strongest winds hitting just up the coast here. Taipei is on the northern side of the island. That's where the country's capital is. But this area got hammered here just a month ago with a typhoon, and again, we're looking at amounts of 20 to 40 inches of rain, which would be catastrophic here, not to mention the wind damage and the storm surge. After Taiwan, it weakens significantly. It will try to clip the coast of China near Shanghai, but eventually the remains go across Japan, and will find themselves in the Pacific later next week, and eventually going to cause the jet stream to get more ample here towards the second and third week of November in the U.S., and a recurving typhoon can often bring down much colder air a lot more extremely as we look into the time leading up to Thanksgiving. The rest of the Pacific here, pretty quiet, upper level low north of Hawaii. That produced snow a couple days ago over the volcanic areas. This is the next feature to watch, but it is not really looking too scary at this point. Whatever survives goes south of Hawaii, and then there's an area behind it that's very broad at this point. But really, it's the Caribbean that we need to be watching here. All right, we're going to shift focus and talk severe weather and active weather here across the states. And you can see here we have a jet streak bringing active weather into Kansas, Nebraska here this morning. As the day wears on and we get some heating, this next piece of energy is going to move northeast and activate our jet stream and lead to some much more active weather. We do have an enhanced risk for severe weather that I'll show you in just a bit. As I show you the jet stream, though, you can see here pretty good upper level low here moving towards the Black Hills of South Dakota. Strong upper level flow jet streak with 80 to 90, maybe 100 mile per hour winds moving through here. And that is going to lift up into the upper Midwest, and much colder air will wrap in behind it. We will see things a little quieter tomorrow, but much quieter by the end of the week. But the pattern repeats itself next week. Another massive trough is going to dig down into the southwest Sunday into Monday, and that will eject onto the plains, and I think we will see another outbreak of severe weather next week, especially the first portion of the week. Here's the enhanced risk, 3 out of 5. Northeastern Oklahoma, eastern Kansas, western Missouri, and the far southeastern tip of Nebraska. And this is going to be active here later in the afternoon into this evening, and then later tonight, moving into central Missouri and the Ozarks region, and all the way down into North Texas. We have a hatched area of strong tornado possibility here, mainly near the I-35 corridor, but down to as far south as Ponca City. And Emporia is kind of the center of this, Topeka, St. Joe's, and Kansas City, and Olathe. Chanute, Kansas, and the Flint Hills as well. And a lot of these tornadoes are probably going to happen in the late afternoon and early evening hours, the maximum for this kind of weather. when we get into the fall season. So we do have that risk for tornadoes, though, going all the way into Wisconsin and western Illinois after midnight tonight, St. Louis, and all the way down to central Arkansas as well, and maybe far northern Texas. Severe wind as well. I think the corridor of the strongest winds actually is on the eastern side of this here tonight. Kansas City, St. Joe's, all going to be potentially at risk of some stronger wind, and also a threat for hail this afternoon and early evening for central Oklahoma, eastern Kansas, and southeastern parts of Nebraska. Tomorrow, the chance for severe weather is not zero, but it is coming down. We see a marginal risk from Louisiana and East Texas up into the Mississippi Valley. And that actually carries up farther all the way into central Indiana, maybe far southern Michigan. Now, this is not going to be a big tornado outbreak by the time we're talking tomorrow. Instead, we're probably going to see broken lines of locally gusty thunderstorms, maybe some heavy rain. If I take that back, there is a tornado risk, though, on the southern tail of this front, mainly across northern Louisiana, Natchitoches, Monroe, Bastrop, Ruston, those areas up into eastern Arkansas, the Delta region here, Memphis, Tennessee, and the boot heel of Missouri. And this could extend a little bit farther north, depending on how things play out tomorrow. After that system moves out, a lot quieter on Friday, but we could have more severe weather in parts of West Texas and New Mexico ahead of our next system. And I forgot to pull it up, but I'll show it to you all here. See if I can, I guess I can't get day 8 on this particular site, so I'll just show it to you on the SPC site here. You will see here, day 4, we do have a risk for severe weather that grows onto day 5, and that would be sometime here Sunday into Monday. We do have that risk for severe weather along and west of I-35 from Nebraska to North Texas. I do think we have more severe weather, by the way, on Monday and Tuesday, but right now the certainty level is not super high, but I would highlight this area and here as we get into that time frame early next week. We'll take a deeper dive on that here in a couple of days. Right now, let's just focus on today. Here's the RRFS model from Pivotal Weather. You'll see storms are going to fire up here and increase in intensity this afternoon. 3 and 4 o'clock, we have a tornado risk. If I pull up a sounding here from Wichita, you will see that things are going to get pretty unstable. It's a marginal tornado risk, but one that we need to watch. And then as we get into the 6, 7, 8 o'clock hours, I'm more focused on the Topeka area for that risk for tornadoes. Not a lot of wind shear, but there will be some. So we definitely need to be watching that. And then this line moves out, and that's pretty much it here overnight tonight. Looking farther east into Missouri, we definitely have a threat for severe weather, kind of 2 waves. One in the northwest part of the state early this afternoon, and then the main line comes in here around and after dark. St. Joe's around 6, KC around 8, Clinton and Joplin later in the evening, and then even overnight tonight, we may see a few tornadoes along the Ozark Plateau and up into central Missouri, possibly even into western Illinois here between Quincy and St. Louis here overnight tonight. That's going to shift out of here, and we'll have much cooler weather for tomorrow. Looking farther south into Oklahoma, we definitely need to watch some of these cells that fire up here near Enid and Ponca City. If I pull up a sounding here, you will see that there is definitely a lot of instability here. There's a bit of a dry level at this point, but it may be overcome here with stronger wind shear. So we have to keep an eye on that area at first, but then this area grows. We actually have 2 regions, one in eastern and southeastern Oklahoma early in the evening, and then the main line coming through here later in the evening along the I-44 corridor, and even getting down close to the Fort Worth area here overnight tonight. That will shift through here pretty quickly, and then tomorrow should be a lot quieter, although farther east, we'll see rough weather in northwest Arkansas overnight tonight, then shifting quickly through in the morning. And I think by afternoon, most of our severe weather is done in Arkansas, but we'll have to watch the Delta region early on in the afternoon. Here's a wider view of everything just to show you all what it looks like here. Even Iowa has a risk for severe weather. Eastern Nebraska, that's going to be mid to late afternoon. Heavy rain follows overnight tonight, and then most of our severe weather is the southern portion of this from Oklahoma up into central Missouri here overnight tonight. Tomorrow, you can see it's not going to look nearly as scary as today, but there will still be a threat for severe weather, in particular across Louisiana, Arkansas, and western Mississippi around midday. And then that is going to quickly fall apart as it heads farther east into the area that really does need the rain here, the Tennessee and Ohio valleys. But we do have some scattered shower potential here Thursday night and early Friday morning. So more details tomorrow. I'll have posts throughout the evening for any major tornadic thunderstorms. There are lots of good meteorologists out here on YouTube. I encourage you to watch their live streams. I'm not going to be able to do that, unfortunately, not this time. But I do appreciate you all for your time today. And if you did enjoy this video, please consider becoming a subscriber. More to come here on future Hurricane Patty tomorrow at lunchtime. So I thank you, and I pray that you have a safe evening and a good Halloween for those who observe. And I do want to give all the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who has just made the difference in my life since I came to know Jesus and had my come to Jesus moment when I was about 30 years old. God is good, and he loves the world. And I think we all want to blame him for everything bad that happens, but that's not God. That is stemming from original sin, and that's the enemy that is basically deceiving us. But we are told, John 3:16, that for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. I don't know about you, but I don't think God doesn't care. I don't think that God is evil. I think he's already given us what we need. We just have to choose to accept that and go out in faith that one day we will be in heaven with Jesus. We will not perish, but we will have eternal life. We only get to live so many years on earth here. We can make that matter, but what I think really truly matters is what happens when our life here is gone. If we chose the faith walk and we chose to believe, then God rewards us because he has already sacrificed his Son, Jesus, so that we can do that. And that is amazing. That is why I became a believer, understanding that my future was not worth gambling on. So I pray that's your case. And if it's not, I am not here to judge you because I have been there. Everybody is welcome to this channel. I appreciate if we're respectful of each other's differences, but that is what drives me to do what I do every day. I've been given this gift by God for others to be able to help you all out with weather. And I want to take that 100% with me to the grave and then eternally to heaven. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, and we'll talk again tomorrow. God bless.